Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Memento Mori Monday, or welcome to Memento Mori Monday if you're new here. Hi, my name is Emmy, and today we will be talking about non-appropriative ancestral veneration, holidays, traditions, ways to go about it. Few of them do have a good amount of overlap, so if there are any that speak to you, there's a pretty good likelihood that there is something that is within your own tradition or is already an open practice where you wouldn't have to then worry about crossing a boundary. This is something that's come up a lot with me at some point or another in the past 10 years. It's come up a good amount in the past 10 years. In the case of spooky season, Halloween, we see the appropriation of cultures when it comes to like costuming, the whole thing of people deciding that they want to dress as a Native American chief, want to paint themselves like a geisha. We've seen it all, and it's not great, no matter what. On some level, we've gotten better. The thing that I have found a little bit trickier, given the nature of we are a more global society, there is more that we can become exposed to as far as traditions go that I think can muddy the waters a little bit, make it a bit more difficult to discern appreciation versus appropriation. And I'm talking most specifically at this point about Day of the Dead. I've seen it happen at least like once a year, where there's this feeling of entitlement from some people. Some people have been welcomed into the tradition, and it would then be appropriate for them to participate in it. It wouldn't be an overreach. It wouldn't be them taking things out of context. I do think, again, with there being a more global culture, with more being online, we're not always getting our information from the best places about whether or not it is respectful or possibly disrespectful to venture in and dabble, which I think is the risk. When we're coming at it on our own without either being invited or having somebody help guide to inform, provide that context is so important. Just grounding it more in reality, the core of the tradition. Like, what's the whole point of Day of the Dead, really? Why do you paint your face? That is all based in intention, and the reasoning behind these traditions are not what we often project onto them or expect them to be okay with when we put, maybe some people put their American spin on it. But that is something that I do want to take a little bit of time to name here. I want to spend some time to unpack this issue itself, and also to offer a few examples for what would be most salient for your particular background, what would be the most appropriate for you in your background, and what could be available to you if maybe you're like, I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to my heritage, or I'm not going to give 23andMe my spit. It's anyone's guess what's going on with me. I appreciate that, and I know that's difficult. It could feel distancing. So I do want to also offer at the end some possibilities for what to do outside of these cultural things. And a few of them are inspired by the things that we touched on, because few do feed into each other and are based on similar roots. First, let's get into a little bit of this nuance here of appreciation versus appropriation. It really does come down to how are you entering into this space? Who are you learning it from? Is there any kind of initiation or training or education that is integral for you to be able to actually get the most out of it, and also to be most respectful to the traditions at hand? I do think there is that layer too. If you're projecting some of your own ideations around these things, then you are going to end up removing it from the context that it belongs in, and then we enter appropriation territory. So I'm thinking about, specifically in the case of Day of the Dead, things like La Catrina, the painting of the face, the skull face, and the kind of decorative nature of it. It isn't strictly a matter of it looking really pretty, or it's not meant to like go hard, to like look hard. It's not meant to be edgy for the sake of being edgy. The nature of it being colorful is that it's meant to be soulful and uplifting. Regina Merson, Mexican-American beauty entrepreneur, she's the founder of this brand. I'll include the information down below There's going to be a lot of links today, a lot of works cited for this one. She noted, one of the most offensive things is when people paint a Katrina and make the look intersect with something scary and bloody. That Katrina represents your dead relative, not a comic book character. I thought this was a very beautiful way to put it, because there is this feeling, the sentiment in other parts of North America that skull equals spooky, skull equals gore, Halloween, the macabre. But in the case of Day of the Dead, it is a tradition. It's very ritualistic. The Katrina is you painting your dead relative. That you wouldn't be, why would you do that to your grandmother, is a good kind of filter to run that through when considering how it is that you're depicting your relative in that way, because that's ultimately what's happening. In Merson's perspective, once I understand that it is about uplifting, it is about joy, it is about appreciation, about bringing family together, they get it. That's what's beautiful about when we are able to have more open conversations, more candid, vulnerable, being willing to either feel stupid or sound stupid potentially. But if you're willing to let that vulnerability be on the table for long enough, then we can get to that exchange, get to that point where you could then participate in perhaps more than what was previously available to you. But if you come in with that entitlement and thinking, oh, I know what it is already, that's where you begin to get in the hot water, because you're really not appreciating it for what it actually is and what it stands for. And yeah, she really does double down to, it should be beautiful, colorful, uplifting. You're channeling people that you loved, those that are coming from the afterlife to visit you, their soul's return. And that should all be channeled. There should be the feeling of love, the reflection on those that passed, what they were like, their vibe too. If they were like really, really jolly people, and then the whole thing of my Day of the Dead skull is going to go hard. It's going to look really edgy. Flames, kind of thing, flames. Yeah, that's really not it. It's about love, respect, mutual care. That's something I wanted to name, because that's the whole reason behind this video. Other than getting into alternatives, there are alternatives. And to that end, still do your own research. Do still investigate any nuance. If there's either a spiritual aspect you're very drawn to, or more of a ritual aspect, or if you're wanting to coordinate with people around it, make sure that everyone is on the same page, especially if they involve other spirits. But first things first, what is veneration? Is it all the same? No, it's not all the same thing. Ancestral veneration is the practice of bringing human and non-human entities into your practice and life in ways that honor them, create reverence for them, and work with them in a variety of ways. Ancestor veneration allows us to move beyond the veil and begin working with the dead, non-human spirits, and divinity in order to connect with culture and ancestry. When we work to connect to culture, we are also working to reconnect with our ancestry, ancestors, and reclaim the heritage they left for us. Thank you so much to Frankie Castaneda for giving me an advanced reader copy of their book, Ancestral Magic. If you all like these quotes, then I encourage you to pick up a copy. Their book comes out November 11th. It's different from place to place, people to people. In some cases, there is this mindset that the dead have a continued existence, or maybe they do have influence on like your current life or fortune, or the way that your family will go about living. Some groups of people do have that direct familial tie. That mentality that I talk about a good amount on this platform is that death doesn't end a relationship, it transforms it. And that is not always necessarily shared across the board, but there are several groups of people across the world that do very strongly hold to this mindset. We do see as well saints come into play, that saints in some groups of people. We're thinking about Eastern Orthodox, Anglican churches, Catholic churches. A lot of families of those backgrounds do have family saints, or a family saint that is attached to their family, that they're like, oh no, that is our guy. St. Anthony, like, we're tight kind of vibe. And that's treated in many ways as an ancestral tie, that intercessor is able to speak both with God, but also across your lineage. There is the sense of them being able to help keep people safe on the other side, and that your saint and your ancestors are able to keep the living safe on the mortal plane. Of course, there are plenty that treat ancestor worship as a type of idolatry, as a sin, and all more power to them. We're going to talk about this too. There's overlap in dates for a few of the Asian traditions. In Eastern Asia, Oceanian, African, Afro-diasporic traditions and those cultures, there is very much the strong sense of the ancestors being able to have a positive impact on our lives, and sometimes even give us special favors like, hey, I need you to look out for me. Hey, I slipped you a little bit of extra coffee this morning. I know how much you like that. Make sure I get a good grade in my exam. And if you have more of a communicative relationship with your ancestors, they might go back and say, but have you been studying? I can't help you if you don't know anything. A lot of my friends that are of either a mixed background or are Afro-diasporic as well are like, yeah, that's a common feeling. It's like, yeah, you should ask for the help, but be prepared for them to tell you that you should still do the work anyway. And yeah, there's a lot of really great options that I really am stoked to dive into. Let's begin with Norse and Germanic. So it's so simple, but honestly, the ability to sit by a gravestone and communicate is quite common within that group of people. And we see within Norse mythos, Odin would make that a practice that shows up in the lore. There's an entity, I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. I will do my best. Haminka, a type of female guardian spirit in Norse mythology. And she was believed to accompany a person and decide their luck and happiness, very much akin to how we might conceive of a spirit guide. Apparently, when a person died, that haminga that was attached to them was passed on to another beloved family member. Thus, they would carry through the family through the generations as a way to keep the good fortune rolling, keep those things in the family. In a sense, the haminga is both entity but also ancestor, and how it's able to kind of carry throughout and live on through the DNA of new people. It's very, very cool. There's also something called winter nights. It is a holy tide, so a time frame, not so much a holiday specifically. This would fall to the end of the fall season and the beginning of winter nights. It was mentioned by Icelandic historian as one of the major 3 holidays in the pre-Christian calendar. Really heavily highlighted Sigurblot and Yule. So those were the top ones, especially around that time frame. Yeah, winter nights marked the beginning of a series of sacrifices. The Blot and Alpha Blot and Disablot were a few of the ones that were flagged there. So yeah, winter nights is, as I noted, more of a period of time versus a specific celebration in of itself. That's something that I think we get messed up too, that Yule is more of like a period of time than one particular celebration. You know, Yule does overlap with the winter solstice. That's where I think that comes from, this mindset that Yule is like a stationary static. It does parallel the Christmas tide season more so than we realize. I was really focused on holy tide of love, loss, and memory, really making an important distinction around speaking the names of those that had passed, in it being a practice of doing it. Many modern heathens do think of it as an offering for male ancestors, as a way to kind of give back to protective spirits, to the family spirits, the land spirits, to give back to community. And to kind of clarify further, the Alpha Blot households would hold this rite, and it was ultimately a sacrifice to the Alfar, which were the elves. So there is a spiritual entity that's involved in it, and also the ancestors, but specifically male ancestors, were the ones that would be upheld in this tradition. There is also All Saints is kind of an everybody thing for those that practice Christianity, it being a holy day of obligation in the church. A lot of people would take time off of work to engage in it. It's very heavily Roman Catholic as far as where it comes up the most. I think this is part of where a lot of people do feel possibly allowed to participate in Day of the Dead, because again, they're taking aspects of what they like visually about Day of the Dead and they're applying it to All Saints' Day, to All Souls' Day. Yes, there's overlap, there are parallels, but they're still ultimately different. Because in Spain and Portugal, there are ofrendas that are made, so offerings are made. A lot of traditional music can be played in Spain, Portugal, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and Ireland. People would often bring flowers to the graves of those that have passed, and then they say prayers over the dead. So very similar in that regard to Day of the Dead. We can see how we get in this trap, how it keeps happening over and over again. And in Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Lithuania, Croatia, Slovenia, Romania, Austria, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Finland, those were also where it was very common to light candles, visit the graves, just be present, hold a vigil. In Slavic and Baltic culture, we have a few other options. Diziadi, this is a celebration of the dead specifically, and it used to be held twice a year, not unlike the Norse rituals of the Alpha Blot and the Disablot being offered, intersecting with the elves. And we're common themes here, leaving food offerings for the dead. The essence of these rituals were communion of the living with the dead. This focus on relationship of the soul with those that have passed, and that there is the understanding and the acceptance that they're able to come in and out of our lives, whether or not we see them necessarily or feel them. We, by being able to gather at the table, can still bring the deceased to our tables. There's also a tradition called Veneration. It is a Latvian name for the pagan Baltic celebration of the dead. It means time of the souls. And the festivities would include a party, going to the graves, lighting candles on the gravestones directly. In ancient times, there was also the honoring and feeding of the ancestors to ensure prosperity in the coming year. Again, common threads. Candles are A-okay. Leaving out offerings is perfectly viable. The differentiation, again, is it appropriate? Are we cherry picking from other things to make it seem more whatever it might be? In Celtic tradition, there was the process of Allantide, or All Hallowtide, the Cornish holiday celebrated at the end of October. Children were given apples as gifts, and when they went to go dream at night, if the apple was placed under their pillow, those were supposed to predict the future. There are a few other things I've heard recently as far as apple peel for divination, which I find so very fascinating and cool. Yeah, there were other forms of fortune telling that would be done. Throwing walnuts into the fireplace and lead pouring. We don't do that anymore for obvious reasons. Samhain, of course, is a Gaelic holiday. It stems from that. And there was this belief that they would come to that the Awasi are a supernatural race from Irish folklore, also known as the people of the mounds. There was this belief that they would come to visit at this specific point in the year and then wander through the villages. That was why villages would leave out the offerings, again, outside, because as the spirits would pass through. Hello, radiator. I don't know if y'all can hear. How rude. So they would leave the offerings of food, drinks, leave them up for the spirits. Divination would be done around then as well, so not unlike Cornwall and Wales. It was also very common to have communal bonfires. People would take the flames from that main bonfire back into their own hearts. So I really, really love this tradition in particular of sharing the flame, sharing the collective power that's been reflected and conjured here throughout the evening. It's a beautiful touch. I wish that we could all do that now. I try to embody that in my work when I host ritual in person in my own way, but that nothing hits quite like being able to share actual fire. China/Taiwan, it was common to venerate ancestors, like, period. In Chinese culture, we do have specific occasions and what they call ghost festivals. I just loved the sound of that from the very beginning. The name relates to the concept of the hungry ghost. It plays a key role in Chinese Buddhism and Taoism, and also Chinese folk religion overall. represents beings that were originally living people, and then those that have died, and then they were driven by very intense emotional needs in a very animalistic way. So there isn't quite the same mindset around spirit, around, okay, they lived, they died, and they're just maybe a wandering spirit, or they have maybe a certain energy going about them where it's still going to feel like them. But there is almost a sense of them falling into baser instinct, that by being removed from their humanity, they were stripped away of the ability to temper and reason and have a higher sense of self that would allow for them not to become animalistic. This culture in particular, I think you will often see families staying together as older people age, as the parents age, that everyone's sticking together. We see that happen all the time, where at the beginning of your life, you're an id-driven child. And then if you do have your memory begin to slip, we hear that a lot when people either have Alzheimer's or slip into other forms of dementia or memory loss. Something slips, and then they do feel childlike. And when we say childlike, it's that they might be lashing out, they might be just like throwing stuff around. They just no longer seem themselves. So we end up reducing it down to, oh, they're acting like an animal. So I thought that was very interesting that that energy is kind of aligned with the ghost spirit. There's also the King Ming Festival, and it's traditionally done on the 104th day after the winter solstice. And it's an opportunity to celebrate and remember and honor the ancestors again at their grave sites. The young and old would go to pray to the ancestors, sweep the tombs, offer food, wine, tea, chopstick, joss, paper, accessories, and or libations. So really any of the above, mixing and matching according to what they either could afford to do or felt appropriate to offer based on the preferences of those that had passed, or even what is traditionally done within that family. And in Taiwan, there is this holiday observed on April 5th because the ruling moved it to that date in commemoration with the death of Chiang Kai-shek. So April 5th is when they have a set day where they celebrate. It's just not timed according to like, oh, solstice ended this day, we have to begin the clock, where it could then be more of a moving holiday. It is firmly set on April 5th. In Japan, we have the Bon Festival. It is a Japanese Buddhist custom to honor the spirits of the ancestors. It does also include a dance known as the Bon Odori. I thought that was really cool too, that there's an element of theatricality brought in, and it involved a family reunion, actually. So you'd bring people in, everybody would return to the ancestral place, the family home, visit. Again, it's very important to clean the grave sites, to hold this space, and they are supposed to revisit these household altars as well. It's not strictly about going to the grave site. It's also about what are we doing on our home bases, which I thought was very interesting. It feels so much like how I've begun to approach my own deity work, where I will have one kind of setup as far as like protections go, and then there are some that I will carry with me on my person as a way of kind of uniting and honoring and connecting that energy from the altar to where I am, so that I am, in a sense, also carrying an altar with me. I love that there are these parallels that I'm already clocking between my own practice and what's already been common practice. In Korea, the Jessa is a ceremony commonly practiced, and that was held on the anniversary of someone who had passed, of the anniversary of their death, of those that had passed. I thought that was brilliant because that is an example that I wanted to offer to you all about what you could do if there isn't anything cultural that's really speaking to you or feels available to you. There is always celebrating or acknowledging the anniversary of those that have passed. Jessa, it's a memorial service that's held on the day of the ancestor's death every year. There is a very special service dedicated to that person, and it is performed up to a point. It is performed until upwards of 5 generations of ancestors in the eldest descendant's house. So there is a bit of a cutoff point, which I can appreciate because that would be a lot of people. But I love that there is like continuity up to 5 generations to continue to speak their name, to honor them. Memorial services that are performed on Chuseok or New Year's Day are called charye. Charye? I will come and correct later. It is a traditional Korean memorial service and ancestral worship ritual performed on major holidays. So we're not thinking about the anniversary, we're thinking about interweaving it with a pre-existing holiday. That's where you see the linking also beginning to happen here. It's happening on April 5th. And so before the Chuseok, Korean people visit the tombs of their ancestors. They trim the grass off of the tombs. So there is, again, that continuity of preening, of cleaning the grave site. And they offer food, fruit, wine. They make vows before the tomb. So there is a ritual, a venerative act. And memorial services that are performed in front of the tombs are called Seong Myo. Within Indian culture, there's a lot of open kind of interconnectivity as far as like life death goes. I, for a while, thought maybe I was Hindu. I took a course in college called the Hindu Vision, and everything about it was like, yes, that's me. There ended up being a few disconnects that kind of removed me from it in the long run. Pitru Paksha, it is a 16 lunar day period where Hindus pay homage to the ancestors through these food offerings. And southern and western India, it often falls within the Hindu lunar month of Bhadrapada, so September, October, and beginning with the full moon day, Purnima, that occurs immediately after the Ganesh festival and then ends with the new moon day known as Sarva Pitri Amavasaya, Mahalaya Amavasaya, or simply Mahalaya. I did it. I got there eventually. In Thailand, Phao Pi, this ceremony literally means spirit dance, and it involves trance dances, usually the result of maybe a vow or maybe a contract made between a specific cult group member and then the ancestral spirits that are then connected to them that are requiring this dance. The dance ultimately attracts large numbers of people, of spectators, from the clan members and the local villages. And the first day of the ceremony is called the Day of Preparation, or Wan Da. On this day, the preparation of offerings is done, the construction of the special trance dance pavilion is also undertaken, also takes place. I thought that was also very interesting that there's a special platform for it. It really amps up that it is an important ritual act, deserving of that platform. And in so many ways, the platform pavilion creation feels like creating a temporary altar. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. We have Roman and Greek. Greco-Roman. This may be a little bit familiar for some of you who've been following me for a while. Parentalia is a 9-day festival for the ancestors, done predominantly in the home, but not unlike the examples we touched on, there is a layer of going to the burial sites. Parentalia does have a few mini festivals within it that keep a few themes moving along that allow for one rite to be completed in order to kick off this rite. So for those that are like, okay, it sounds familiar, I had offered in the beginning of the year, so if you're watching this later, that was February 2025, I offered a Parentalia themed reading that involved channeling and tarot. And it was a means of offering kind of spiritual support to folks who wanted that channeling and also wanted guidance for how to either connect more with their ancestors or certain ancestors, or maybe how to fortify your practice overall. So there was that element of wanting to help guide people into what will work best for you, or maybe what even are some ancestors piping up about that they're like tired of beating around the bush with you. There were a few spicy things that came up for sure. But yeah, these observances in particular were really meant to strengthen these connections, like these ties that were protective in nature between the living and those that had passed. There was like a very much like a lawful duty aspect where the people, the ones that really took up the majority of the heavy lifting, were the heads of the house, or paterfamilias. Ovid described the sacred offering, or sacrificia, of flower garlands, wheat, salt, wine-soaked bread was very common, and violets to the shades of the dead, or manes or di manes, at the family tombs. This was the part where they would have to go off-site to the family tombs to enact this next part. It was located outside of Rome's very sacred boundary, or pomerium. So there was this mindset that there was something kind of other about it, that if it's happening outside in the shades of the dead, there is like, we don't go there unless we have to. We go there to go do the task. You don't really go otherwise. So there was a very intentional separation going on there. And during the parentalia, there was the feralia. And again, the othering of it all, that the demones, those that had passed, we assumed then in Greek, Roman culture, oh, they're pissed. They are mad. They are hungry. We got to go take care of that. We have to go make it right with them. We owe them. And once we're done, we'll wash our hands of it until next year. So the head of the household would take on that part. That's where they really had to then step in to make it right for everybody. Other than that, the families would go together to lead those offerings. The Garisita was the final day of parentalia. This is when the offerings are made to the lares, or the household gods. And family members would then celebrate their love for them with these feasts, with gifts. It had a much nicer vibe. It sounded a lot nicer than how Feralia was like, okay, gotta go deal with the feral spirits of our grandfather. Okay, at least there's gonna be a feast later. Oh man, that sounds so severe. I do appreciate that across the Greek, Greco-Roman tradition, like ancient festival tradition, that there were a few other festivals that do have a through line of venerating ancestors, whether it's like the main event or it's like folded in. This one example of this is the Anthesteria in the spring. This is the festival to the main event was honoring Dionysus, the new wine crop, and also the ancestors. So one of those like being woven in. Anthesteria, for a little bit more context, is one of the 4 Athenian festivals to honor Dionysus, and it was often held from the 11th to the 13th of the month of Anthesterion, which typically falls around the January-February full moon. The 3rd day of the festival for Anthesteria would be the Choitro or Kaitre, and that was when there would be cooked grains and seeds that were left out for the dead. And then there was also special attention paid to Hermes Chthonios, and the Keres were also given offerings. So Hermes Chthonios is paying respect to the chthonic underworld, earthly epitaph, earthly side of Hermes. Hermes is a psychopomp, able to go between time and worlds. He can mosey on up to Olympus and then go back down to the underworld. Like, love that for him. And the Keres were death spirits. They were not female death spirits, to be specific. They didn't specifically have the power to kill, but they still had this feral, intense, spooky energy. In ancient Greece, people were deeply afraid of them. They were the daughters of Nyx and were therefore sisters of the Mori, the fates that would decide the fates of souls. And they also had the lineage of Thanatos being their parent. So the god of peaceful death, not to be confused with Hades. That always gets me. The Keres were also thought to be one of the evil spirits associated with Pandora's box, that when Pandora opened the box, that might have been what also popped out too. Very, very curious. In preparation for another project that I'm doing very soon, I did also learn that sirens were believed to be the Keres. So there is very much this patriarchal fear of powerful women, of women using sweet words to do evil things, to coerce in some way. But at the end of the day, it's all information. It's all up to speculation. Also, my brain completely blanked twice. To mention Giorno dei Morti directly translates to Day of the Dead. Similarly, across other traditions, involves visiting and cleaning cemeteries, leaving flowers, particularly chrysanthemums, on graves, and making special treats. The most common ones are fave di morti, which are beans of the dead, ossa di morti, which are bones of the dead, and fruta martorana, or like these marzipan fruits. So they were left on the graves, and this practice seems to have maybe fallen a little bit out of fashion, but it is still very common, and it's common both within Italy as well as Sicily. So there was also this mindset within Sicily. It was believed that the deceased would leave like small gifts or sweets in the shoes of children overnight. So I thought that was a really brilliant way to have a tie-in across the generations, those that have passed and the generation that's coming up. So yeah, I thought that was really, really brilliant. And it overlaps with All Saints Day and All Souls Day, as has been the case with the other kind of Judeo-Christian cultures we have already flagged, but wanted to include that here. If you want even more detail about Giorno dei Morti, I am pretty sure that Frankie Castaneda is going to be having a video coming out about that. I'll update the description with that link if it ever becomes available. And last but not least, we have the Day of the Dead. We know what she is. We know we're not going to just go and do it because we want to do a bloody sugar skull because we saw it on Pinterest. Don't do it. That wraps up it felt like a speed round for me, but the raw footage is saying I've been talking for 46 minutes, at least. But anyway, I hope that you all enjoyed this I hope you all enjoyed this ancestral holiday veneration tradition 101. I enjoyed putting it together. Those are all of the kind of real world, tangible examples that I think you could definitely give a try if you do belong to any of those different cultural groups. You could always return back to that if that feels like it's speaking to you, or if you were feeling drawn to reviving an ancestral veneration tradition. As far as what else to do, I know I kind of pepper that in throughout our discussion here, but I think you can really keep it as simple as we can maybe make this a whole separate video too around ancestral veneration, what I do, what you could do to make your practice more you. But I think overall, you can keep it super simple from the beginning. You can also check in to see what feels right. You can venerate ancestors both known and unknown. You can venerate a specific ancestor that you knew that you vibed with. Because, a lot of us people who are experiencing hardship, that are queer, that don't feel supported by the living, maybe will feel supported by those that were in our past lineage that were also marginalized. Like, we're going to be looking out for each other. The vested interest in helping to see you succeed, see you have a sense of safety and stability So it could be as simple as offering a glass of water, refreshing that water. You can offer a candle. If you are already going to make a pot of coffee for yourself, then make that pot of coffee and bring an extra cup, and then offer that to your ancestor. Holy smoke is a common one as well. If you were an incense family, then by all means, burn some incense for them. If you are going to be making a larger meal and you either want to bring it to the altar or take that mindset of communion and communing with the spirits of those that have passed, having a separate plate, a separate place set on the table for those that have passed, welcoming them in to partake with you, offering it as an offering. Just saying it out loud is inherently devotional. And I think we often overlook too that we have to have everything be so transactional, and it all has to be like things done. Like, acts of service are also devotional and could be a way to venerate those that have passed. And as we've flagged in a few of the examples across the world, is even making the trip of going to your home base, going to where someone was buried, and ensuring that it's staying in good order, that if that were you and if it looked like trash, would you feel insulted that the living hadn't come in a year? It'd be one thing if like, oh, well, I get it, like months go by, it is what it is. But if it's been a full year or over a year and there's like weeds, it's in a state, I'll be upset. So I think of things like that when conceptualizing how could I be a better presence to those that have passed, that I hold in my heart, that I love them, I care about them, but how do I bridge this connection? how do I bridge this gap here? I think that could be something very lovely to do, is to go and do that clearing, be present. As we noted, just going there to talk in and of itself, spirits get lonely. So offering your presence, I think, is also a beautiful thing. Bringing food to the burial site. There are rules depending on the burial site of, modern day. You're not going to leave it there. It could end up being a hazard to like local wildlife, to the local ecology. I think those are the core aspects that I would tell to any person that wanting to get back into it. You can choose like a liminal time of year. You can choose times of year where it's not strictly ancestral, but it is family oriented, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time to just offer a prayer, say a few words, invite them in, and offer words of love and care. It could be as simple as doing that. Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it is you celebrate with other family members. It doesn't have to strictly be their anniversary of death, their birthday. And I know it can be nice and exciting to have Day of the Dead as like a static date, but there are things that you can and should build out and maybe use the different examples I noted as inspiration, but not removing them from their cultural context so that they remain respected and the dead also do feel appreciated by what you've offered them. I want to take a moment to thank you all for watching today's video. I wanted to thank the sponsors of this video. I want to thank my alchemists, my seekers, and I want to take an extra moment to thank one by one my conjurer tier. All of you are top tier patrons, but they're the top of the scale. I want to thank Karina, Georgia, Jess, Laura, Rachel, and Mallow. Thank you all for being conjurers. Thank you for being members of this community. And thank you for supporting my work. And yeah, let me know if you all have any questions about anything that I have explored here today. If there are any that are speaking to you, if there's anything in particular that you're feeling like you want to dive into and try out for yourself that maybe you've put off, just stay away from any images that are appropriative. And yeah, just stay in your lane. And you could very well not listen to me, and that's fine. But that's all for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.